Morning, everybody. Ever been on an aircraft carrier? They're pretty cool, aren't they? Well, the development of the aircraft carrier has been fascinating from the very beginning to where they are today, and it was on this date in 1960, September 24, that the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier went underway, and that was the USS Enterprise. In 1910, Eugene Ely flew off a stationary warship in an airplane. This was 7 years after the Wright brothers, so you can tell from this photo that his airplane looks a lot like a Wright Flyer from a few years before. In 1912, Mr. Rumney of the Royal Navy was the first to fly off a moving warship, so good for him. 1918, His Majesty's ship, the Argus, was one with a full flight deck that went the entire length of the ship, and this, like many of the early ones, was on a converted hull of another type of ship. The Japanese had an aircraft carrier in 1922. Japan, one of the great naval powers in Asia. And then the same year, 1922, was our USS Langley, the first aircraft carrier for the U.S. Navy, built on a converted collier, and its designation is CV-1. So aircraft carriers were CV. Here's the Yorktown CV-10. In Charleston, South Carolina, the C stands for some kind of cruiser. The V, there are various definitions of that. But everybody was thinking battleships in the 1920s and 30s. These were the great capital ships of the world's navies, but they were very expensive to build and very expensive to maintain. So in the 1920s, there was a conference in Washington known as the Washington Naval Conference, in which the great naval powers agreed to limit the size and the number of their capital ships. But what about aircraft carriers? They kind of slipped through the cracks. So this one, the Ranger CV-4, was our first purposely built aircraft carrier, built from the keel up to be an aircraft carrier. And there were design changes as we headed toward World War II, like an armored deck, the fear of attack from airplanes. Now, airplanes had folded wings for a long time, but this was part of the aircraft carrier too on the run up to World War II. So when Japan decided to attack Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941, they were able to approach Hawaii with lots of airplanes because they could store them on the decks or in the hangars beneath the decks. And on that attack, our 4 aircraft carriers were not there, just the battleships. So during the war, there were lots of technological advances for aircraft carriers. One of them was radar. Aircraft carriers were really nervous about attacks from high-altitude bombers. So they would have lots of anti-aircraft guns. They would also have airplanes on their own ships that could help defend against airplane attacks. And by the time we got to the end of World War II, and here's the photo of our fleet at the Ulithi Atoll, we had almost 30 fleet carriers, but then we had escort carriers and all kinds of carriers, almost 100 of various types. It's just hard to believe today. Well, when World War II ended, one innovation was the jet. So how do you have a jet on an aircraft carrier? And so design changes had to come, and this one, CV-59, the Forrestal, had an angled deck, it had steam catapults, it had an optical landing system. So this is a sign that technology is changing, and you better get ready for jet aircraft. The first nuclear warship was the Nautilus, the submarine. You can visit it today in Groton, Connecticut. And 6 years later was our event. So September 24, 1960, the first nuclear aircraft carrier, the Enterprise. Pictured here, you can see Einstein's formula E=mc² spelled out by sailors on the deck. Today, our largest carrier is the Gerald R. Ford CVN-78. Twice the size and 7 times heavier than our first carrier.